They left Winterfell in a thin line of horses and steaming breath, hooves crunching through crusted snow. The world was washed in gray. Dawn had barely broken. The eastern sky held only the faintest hint of color, a pale bruise along the horizon. The castle's looming walls receded behind them with each step, towers fading into the low cloud. For all its size and age, Winterfell looked small at a distance, like some child's toy forgotten in the snow. Jon Snow twisted in his saddle to watch it go. He saw the top of the broken tower where Bran had fallen, the curl of smoke from the smithy, the faint gleam of banners along the inner wall. Somewhere in that maze of stone and courtyards and secrets, Bran sat wrapped in furs, watching with eyes that had seen more than they ought. Sansa and Arya would be with their father, preparing for the south. Robb would be on the walls, he knew it, jaw clenched, watching Jon's back diminish. Catelyn Stark did not come to the gate. The space where she might have stood was as marked in Jon's mind as any face. "Don't break your neck looking over your shoulder," Benjen Stark said beside him. His uncle's voice carried easily in the cold. "The road goes one way at a time, Jon. There'll be naught behind you but your own regrets if you keep at it." Jon faced forward. "I know. You don't," Benjen said, not unkindly. "But you will." Ghost darted ahead, white against white, almost invisible until he flashed through shadow. One of the other recruits, a thick-shouldered youth with a broken nose and a thief's eyes, cursed softly under his breath at the sight. "What in all seven hells is that?" "Dire wolf," Jon said. "He's mine." The youth muttered something about curses. Yoren of the Night's Watch spat and told him to mind his tongue unless he wanted it bitten off. Cold air knifed through Jon's cloak. He drew it tighter as they rode, feeling for the warmth that had become as familiar as his own heartbeat. It was there but faint. Skyrender was still in Winterfell. Jon had gone to him before dawn, slipping through the sleeping castle like a thief. The hidden chamber beneath the crypts had grown too small for the dragon. Jon had known it would, but knowing did not make the cracked stone and deep claw gouges any less worrying. Skyrender filled the space now, wings crumpled tight, tail curled, eyes bright in the dark. "You can't come," Jon whispered, pressing his forehead to hot scales. Skyrender had rumbled low in his chest at that, a protest that vibrated through Jon's bones. Heat rolled off him in waves, fogging the chill air. "I have to go," Jon said. "To the wall, to the watch. If I bring you, it'll be banners and crowns and maesters crawling all over you before we reach the King's Road. They'll put you in chains and call it honor." He felt the dragon's breath stir his hair. "We're not ready," he went on, as if arguing with himself as much as with the beast. "You can hunt here, hide here. Bran will watch you. The roots." His hand found the carved stone behind him, the faint hum he'd come to associate with the old magic of the place. "They'll keep you safe." Skyrender's head dipped, his muzzle pressed against Jon's chest, pushing hard enough to rock him back a step. Jon buried his fingers in the ridged skin at the base of the dragon's horns. "I swear," he said into the dark, "I'll come back, or I'll find a way to call you. There's a bond between us. You feel it. I feel it. That doesn't break for a few leagues of snow." Skyrender's tail lashed once, striking sparks off stone. Ghost, watching from the mouth of the chamber, whined softly, head tilting as if he understood too much of what was said. When Jon drew back, Skyrender reached with one foreclaw, talons curving delicately. The tip traced a line down Jon's breastplate, leaving no mark but a faint warmth. "Stay low," Jon whispered. "Stay hidden. Eat all the ravens you like if they bother you. Just don't get seen." Skyrender's pupils narrowed to slits, then widened again. The rumble in his chest shifted, flattening into a sound Jon was beginning to recognize as reluctant acceptance. He left then because if he stayed a moment longer he would not be able to make himself go. Now, on the King's Road, with Winterfell shrinking behind him and the north opening up in long, cold miles ahead, the absence of that constant, furnace-like presence made his bones ache. Ghost threw his head back and let out a low, short howl. Far behind them, unseen beyond walls and roots and stone, something answered in the dark. A muffled sound, half roar, half cry, that never reached human ears but vibrated through the marrow of a boy and a dragon both. Skyrender could not measure distance in leagues, nor time in days. He knew only nearness and farness, warmth and cold, the hum of roots and the call of the boy whose blood had woken his own fire. When Jon rode away, Skyrender felt it like ice creeping under his scales. The boy's presence, which had been a constant pressure at the edge of his mind since hatching, stretched. Not snapped, never snapped, but thinned like sinew stretched between 2 points. Ghost's awareness went with it, the familiar wolf note receding into the northern dark. Skyrender prowled the godswood that night, too restless to stay in stone. He had broken the storeroom wall once already, finding a narrow crawl that led up and up to a fissure near the weirwood's roots. The first time he had squeezed through, the tree had shuddered around him, leaves rattling in silent objection. Now the passage felt familiar, a stone throat he knew how to slide through without choking. He emerged into snow and sap. The weirwood rose above him, branches spread like bloodied fingers against the moon. Its carved face stared outward, but Skyrender felt its attention turn inward, toward him, toward the hollow beneath where his egg had slept. He coiled around the great trunk, claws digging into the frozen earth. Steam rose where his heat met the cold. The old roots brushed his belly, slow and patient and deep. Somewhere far away, a boy's heart beat faster. The wall loomed, though he had never seen it. The sky there smelled different in Skyrender's mind. Sharper, thinner, threaded with a cold that tasted like iron nails. He lifted his head and hissed softly. The tree answered with a groan no human throat could have formed. Branches creaked. Snow fell in a soft cascade. Red leaves whispered, rattling like distant applause or warning. Skyrender's tail lashed. He sank his claws deeper into the ground, anchoring himself. Not yet, the roots seemed to say. Not yet, but soon. The King's Road ran like a scar through the north, straight and hard and packed brown where the snow hadn't yet reclaimed it. They followed it for days, the company shrinking and stretching as the terrain demanded. Nights, they made camp in hollows and along frozen streams, huddling around small fires. Yoren told stories sharp as his knives. The recruits, thieves, poachers, one runaway lordling with soft hands and softer eyes, huddled close, their breath white in the dark. Tyrion Lannister sat apart most evenings, back against a tree or a rock, wineskin never far from his hand. His eyes missed little. "You look like a man caught between cell and gate," he observed one night, when Jon had drifted too near in his restlessness. Bars behind, snow ahead. Jon shrugged. Ghost sat at his back, fur warming the space where Skyrender's heat would have been. "The wall's not a cell." "No." Tyrion's smile was thin. "A band of men sworn never to leave it, under penalty of death? Sounds like a sort of cage to me." "It's a duty," Jon said. The word steadied him. "Someone has to stand there, to keep." He glanced at Yoren. The recruiter was busy picking his teeth with a knife, but his ears worked fine. Jon lowered his voice. "Things out." "Ah, yes." Tyrion tipped his head back, peering up at the stars. "The others, the shadows in old Nan's stories. I met your lady grandmother's tale-teller once. Fierce old woman. She nearly hit me with a ladle when I called her tales nonsense." "They're not," Jon said, with more conviction than he'd have had a year ago. "The world is," he faltered, "bigger, stranger, full of dragons under roots and boys who fly in dreams. Fuller than maesters say." Tyrion's gaze slid to him. "You have a tone," he said, "like a man who's seen something and been told not to speak of it. Careful with that. Secrets have teeth." "I know how to keep my mouth shut," Jon said, bristling. "Do you?" Tyrion sipped his wine. "Then you're already better prepared than half the men you ride with, and half the ones you leave behind." The fire crackled. Someone began to snore. Far off, a wolf howled. Not Ghost. whose steady breath warmed Jon's back, but some cousin in the dark. Jon listened to it, feeling the echo of a deeper roar far behind him, beneath Winterfell's roots. "Tell me something, bastard," Tyrion said soundlessly, his voice soft enough that only Jon could hear. "Do you ever feel like the world is leaning? As if someone has put too much weight on one side of it, and the whole thing might tip?" Jon thought of the king dragging Ned south, of Bran's fall, of a dragon's egg cracking in his hands. "Yes," he said. "Good," Tyrion replied. "You're paying attention." The night Skyrender chose to leave was clear and bitter. Frost had crept across every surface in the God's Wood, turning branches into white-laced fingers and the pool into a mirror of stone. The stars were hard points in a sky so dark it seemed to go on forever. The weirwood had gone still, sap sunk deep, watching with the slow attention of things that measured existence in winters rather than hours. Skyrender climbed from his stone throat as he always did, pushing his shoulders through the narrowest part, flattening his wings until they scraped the sides. The rock protested, shedding dust and thin flakes. His claws sank into the thawed circle around the tree, the only place in the wood where frost never quite reclaimed the earth. He coiled once, twice, testing his muscles. Jon was far now. The bond between them stretched thin as spider silk, but it had not broken. It hummed at the edge of Skyrender's awareness like a distant storm. The boy's fear and stubbornness and cold and heat all mixed together, a tangled song that would have made no sense to anyone else. The wall lay ahead on that thread. The dragon did not know walls, but he knew direction. He hissed. Snow sifted from the weirwood's branches. Roots tightened around the empty hollow beneath. "Not yet," the old voice seemed to say again, reluctant. Skyrender ignored it. He crouched low, wings spreading as far as the trees allowed, membranes catching the starlight. For a heartbeat, he was a dark, taut bough. Then he leapt. Earth and snow exploded outward where his hind feet had been. Claws shredded frozen soil, exposed the thick, gnarled roots below. Red leaves stormed around him, torn from branches by the force of his ascent. He cleared the topmost branches in a single bound. For a moment, Winterfell lay spread beneath him. Walls and towers, chimneys and courtyards, all smaller than they had ever seemed. He saw the broken tower where Bran had fallen. He saw the rookery. He saw the faint glow of fires through shuttered windows. Two shapes moved on a balcony. One tall, fur-bedecked. One shorter, hair pale as straw. Skyrender's eyes slit at the sight of Catelyn Stark and Maester Luwin staring up, their faces turned toward the sudden rush of wind. He beat his wings. Wind screamed as it tore past the walls. Snow whirled in his wake. He climbed, each stroke of his wings dragging him higher, farther. The cold bit at his scales. He shed it in steam. Below, Winterfell rocked on its foundations. Above, the stars watched a dragon carve a new line across the northern sky. Jon woke with his heart slamming against his ribs. He had been dreaming of flying. Bran's raven at his shoulder, the wall a blue wound below, when the dream shuddered, tilted, and became something else. Heat had flooded his senses, the rush of wind over scales and through wings. For an instant, he'd seen Winterfell from above, small and fragile and beloved. He sat up, breath tearing from his lungs. The camp lay around him, full of sleeper snores and the dull glow of banked coals. Yoren muttered in his sleep, some curse or prayer. Benjen lay on his back, hands folded across his chest, face unreadable even in rest. Ghost was already awake. The direwolf's head was lifted, ears pricked, eyes fixed on the sky. A low sound vibrated in his chest, not quite a growl. "What is it?" Jon whispered. He followed Ghost's gaze. For a moment he saw nothing, just stars, cold and distant, and wisps of thin cloud. Then one of the stars winked out. Another. A band of darkness swept across the sky, blotting a swath of light. It moved fast, silent as a held breath. Jon felt it in his bones before his eyes could make sense of it. The rush of air, the beat of wings, the the hot coil of presence snapping taut in his chest. Skyrender. The shadow cut across the camp. The fire's last embers flared as if in sudden, startled response. Cloth rustled as the wind of its passage brushed sleeping forms. One of the horses stamped, tossing its head, eyes rolling white. Then the shadow passed, lost beyond the line of trees. Jon's mouth was dry. He realized he was smiling and didn't remember deciding to. He looked around quickly. Yoren stirred, scratching his nose and falling back into deeper sleep. One of the other recruits rolled over and farted. Tyrion Lannister, propped against his rock with his cloak wrapped tight, had his eyes closed and his chin on his chest. But Jon had learned by now that meant little. "You see no owls," Tyrion said softly, without opening his eyes. "And yet you stare as if the sky has insulted your honor." Jon started. "Did you see?" Tyrion opened one eye, peered upward, then shrugged. "Something. A trick of the dark. A cloud. A bird with delusions of grandeur." His gaze slid sidelong to Jon. "Or perhaps the magic of your old Nan's stories, come to pluck us from our beds." Jon's hand found Ghost's fur. "You don't believe in magic," he said. "My father didn't believe I'd live to see 10, Tyrion replied. "Sometimes the world delights in proving clever men wrong. Try not to look so guilty, bastard. Whatever flew overhead, you didn't set it on us. Did you?" Jon forced his face into blankness. "No," he said, and this at least was true. He hadn't called Skyrender. Skyrender had come. "Then sleep," Tyrion said. "If it means to eat us, it'll do it whether you've had your rest or not." Jon lay down again, though sleep did not come quickly. He stared at the slice of sky he could see between branches and thought of how thin the bond between him and Skyrender had felt, stretched across that distance, and how it had sung now, pulled tight and close. The wall was still ahead. The Night's Watch still waited, but he would not come to them alone. They saw the wall before the wall saw them. It rose out of the northern horizon like some impossible wave frozen in the moment before it crashed. Blue, white, and sheer, its face caught the morning light and flung it back in cold, merciless glitter. The top edge curved slightly with distance, disappearing into haze. The road narrowed as it approached, flanked by sparse, wind-twisted trees. The air grew sharper, each breath knifing at Jon's throat. Ghost trotted closer to his knee, fur bristling as if the wall itself gave off a scent. Tyrion Lannister sat his pony and stared, wineskin forgotten at his side. "Now that," he said softly, "is a wall." Benjen's face was turned toward it too, expression unreadable. "And your new home," he said to Jon. Jon swallowed. "It'll do." His heart hammered, not just with awe, but with the awareness of another presence closing fast. "Uncle," he said, "I need a moment, before we go on." "To piss?" Yoren suggested dryly. Benjen waved a hand. "Make it quick. We'll not keep the old bear waiting because your bladder's shy." Jon nudged his horse off the road, into a shallow hollow screened by scrub. Ghost followed. He dismounted quickly, tying the reins with hands that wanted to shake. The air trembled. He felt it before he heard anything. A pressure on his ears, a subtle shift in the wind. Then the sound came. A low, rising rush like a distant waterfall, growing louder, closer. Skyrender dropped out of the eastern sky, a dark shape against the brightening blue. For a moment, Jon's knees went weak at the sight. The dragon had grown even in the short time since he'd left Winterfell. His body was thick as a small horse's now, longer, more corded with muscle. His wings stretched wider than a hall's length, membranes dark as storm clouds, veined with faint, pale threads. When the dawn caught his scales, the white streaks along his sides glowed like lightning captured in flesh. He came in too fast. "Easy," Jon hissed, stepping forward, one hand up as if he could physically slow him. Skyrender flared his wings at the last instant. Air slammed outward in a gust, flattening scrub and sending snow billowing. He hit the ground hard enough that Jon felt the impact in his boots. Claws dug furrows into frozen soil. Snow exploded around them, a white curtain hiding them from the road for a heartbeat. Ghost stood his ground. The direwolf's hackles were up, but he did not growl. His red eyes watched the dragon with the flat, measuring calm of a fighter who has already decided who stands in his pack. 7 hells? Jon whispered, grinning despite himself. You came. Skyrender's head dropped low, muzzle bumping Jon's chest hard enough to drive the breath from him. Heat soaked through his cloak. Jon laughed, the sound choked, and wrapped his arms as far as they would go around the dragon's neck. Warmth surged through him where their foreheads touched. It was not just heat, it was a rush of sensation. Wind over wings, the sting of ice against scale, the dizzying height of the world seen tiny below. In return, Jon felt Skyrender taste the scents on his skin. Sweat and leather and cold and fear and stubbornness. You were supposed to stay, Jon said, voice muffled against scales. Skyrender huffed. A curl of steam escaped his nostrils, brushing Jon's cheek. His pupils were narrow slits, then widened as he drew back to study Jon's face. You bloody stupid, wonderful beast, Jon muttered. You'll get us both killed. He stepped back, hands mapping the dragon almost unconsciously, checking for injuries, for strain. Skyrender watched him, turning slightly this way and that to accommodate his inspection. You'll have to stay clear of the wall, Jon said, thinking aloud. For now. If they see you, they'll either try to put a chain on you or send every raven in the world south screaming about dragons. We don't want either. Skyrender blinked slowly. There are cliffs, Jon went on. He turned, peering toward the looming bulk of the wall. To the west, the land rose in ragged hills, sharp white and gray where rock broke through snow. Caves, places to hide. You'll hunt up there. Fly at night. I'll come to you when I can. He hesitated, glancing back at the road. Felix. The broken-nosed recruit was pissing against a tree, back turned. Yoren was arguing with his mule. Tyrion's pony shifted, ears flicking, but its rider was squinting at the wall, likely composing some barbed, dwarfish observation in his head. Benjen sat upright in his saddle, gaze sweeping the tree-line, but Skyrender's arrival had been shielded by the hollow and the burst of snow. Jon let out the breath he'd been holding. We'll make this work, he said to Skyrender. Somehow. Skyrender snorted, as if insulted by the suggestion that they would do anything else. Ghost padded forward, pressing his head briefly against the dragon's foreleg. Skyrender's claws flexed, careful, and he lowered his muzzle to sniff the direwolf's ears. A soft rumble passed between them, acknowledgement. Your pack, both of you, Jon said. Whatever comes. A shout from the road broke the moment. Jon, Benjen's voice. Move your feet, boy. The wall won't get any softer while you dally. Jon grimaced. Go, he told Skyrender. Up into the hills. I'll call for you. He stepped back, making a sweeping gesture toward the west. For a heartbeat, he thought Skyrender would refuse. The dragon's tail lashed, claws sinking deeper into the snow. Then he crouched, wings spreading. The downstroke nearly knocked Jon off his feet. Skyrender launched himself skyward, clearing the ridge in 2 beats. Snow fell in glittering sheets from his wings. He vanished into cloud and distance as swiftly as he'd come, leaving only disturbed air and a faint echo of heat behind. Jon straightened, dusted snow from his cloak, and led his horse back to the road. No one commented on the extra steam that clung to him. Castle Black looked smaller than he had imagined, crouched at the foot of the wall like a cluster of black stones discarded by the massive glacial cliff behind it. Wooden towers and low, soot-stained buildings huddled together, their roofs laden with snow. Smoke rose from chimneys, torn thin by the wind. A rickety-looking elevator mechanism creaked and groaned its way up the wall's face, a tiny box on a rope against the sheer ice. The main gate was a heavy thing of wood and iron, far less impressive than Winterfell's, but the wall above it made up for any lack of grandeur. Jon's breath caught as they rode under its shadow. The cold there was a different beast, older, deeper, sharp as broken glass. It crept through his cloak and bit at his bones, and yet under it all he felt Skyrender's warmth thrumming faintly, like embered coal under a thick layer of ash. Men in black cloaks came to meet them in the yard, snow crunching under their boots. Some were young, faces still soft. Others wore beards stiff with frost, lines carved deep into their skin by wind and years. They looked at the new recruits with a mixture of resignation and faint, brittle hope. Jeor Mormont, Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, the Old Bear, stood at the front. His shoulders were broad under his heavy furs, his hair gone to gray, his eyes dark and sharp. A living wall in front of the dead one. Benjen dismounted and clasped forearms with him. Words were exchanged, formal greetings, private jokes. Jon listened, but his attention was snagged by the feel of many eyes on him. Another lordling with soft hands? A voice sneered to his left. Jon turned. Ser Alliser Thorne stood near the practice yard, arms folded, mouth twisted in what was probably meant to be a smile. His face was long and hollow-cheeked, his eyes like flint. "Not a lordling," Jon said, keeping his voice level. "A bastard." Ser Alliser's cold gaze flicked over him, then down to Ghost. "And a bloody walking rug," he said. "Lovely, just what we needed. A boy who thinks himself a man because he has a big dog." Ghost's lips peeled back, teeth flashing. "Dire wolf," Jon said calmly, "and he thinks himself a man without needing to." Murmurs rippled through the watching brothers. Some smirked. Others winced, as if they could already feel the drills Ser Alliser would inflict for that insolence. Jeor Mormont's lip twitched, almost a smile. "Thorne," he said, "try not to kill them all in their first week. Some of them may yet prove useful." He turned his attention to Jon. "You have your uncle's look," he observed, "and his knack for ill-timed words." "Yes, my lord," Jon said. "My lord is for south of the wall," Mormont replied. "Up here it's my lord commander. Or old bear, if you're drunk. You'll call me one or the other and you'll mean it." "Yes, lord commander." Mormont studied him a moment longer. His gaze slid to Ghost, then back. Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition of old blood, perhaps, or of some quality he couldn't yet name. "We'll see what you're worth," he said at last. "The North has sent us boys before. Some turn to men. Some," his mouth flattened, "some don't." Jon swallowed. "I'll do my duty. See that you do." Mormont turned away, barking orders to the men behind him. The yard burst into motion. Jon stood under the wall's shadow, Ghost at his side, feeling small and new and very far from Winterfell. Yet above the curtain of ice, beyond the line of sight, he felt another shadow moving, unseen. Skyrender circled high over the mountains to the west, following the tug of their bond, watching the tiny black ants at the base of the wall with eyes that saw farther and clearer than any raven's. A new piece had come into play in the north. No one but a bastard boy and a dragon knew it yet. The days fell into a rhythm sharp as the crack of wood on wood. Dawn brought cold that seeped into fingers and lungs. Jon woke in an unfamiliar bed in an unfamiliar drafty tower, surrounded by the snores and mutters of other boys who'd forgotten what warmth beyond a fire felt like. Ghost's presence at the foot of his bed was the one familiar constant. They ate the food as gray and thin as the light. Then they trained. Ser Alliser Thorne delighted in breaking them down. His voice cut through the yard, flaying pride and dignity alike. "Hit him, you sheep-brained wretch. Your mother swung a cleaver harder than that. You Snow, is it? Put that pretty blade to use. Teach Lord Slobber here which end goes in the enemy." Jon had always been quick with a sword. At Winterfell, he'd matched Robb and sometimes bested him. Here, among green boys from the south and men who'd never held anything but a farmer's scythe, his skill stood out like a wolf among sheep. He didn't mean to humiliate them. He meant to train as he'd always trained, with focus and intent. But intent didn't stop bruises. By the end of the first week, resentment stalked him as surely as Ghost did. "You think you're better than us? One of the recruits, Gren, Big and slow but loyal, grunted after Jon knocked him flat for the third time. I never said that, Jon replied. You don't have to, Dolorous Ed muttered nearby. It seeps from your pores like arrogant sweat. Jon snapped more sharply than he intended. If you learned to keep your feet, Ser Alliser seized on his words. Hear that? He called. The noble bastards decided to grace us with his wisdom. Tell me, Snow, when you fight the dead in the dark, will you have time to lecture them on their stance? The yard snickered. Jon felt anger rise, hot and sharp. Under it, like a second flame, he felt Skyrender's distant irritation, as if the dragon bristled at slights he didn't understand. He imagined calling Skyrender then. Imagined dark wings blotting out the insult, dragonfire washing away jeers. The image was so vivid he could almost see it. Ser Alliser's sneer wiped clean by awe and terror. He pushed it down. Again, he said to Gren, offering a hand. Gren stared at it a heartbeat, then took it. Again, he agreed, breathing hard. That night, when the others snored in their furs, Jon climbed the steps to the top of the wall. The world was simple from the top of the wall. South was shadow, dotted with the faint, hesitant glows of hearths and watchfires. North was a dark sea of trees and snow stretching to the edge of sight. Above, stars. Below, the long, dizzying drop of ice. The wind screamed along the top, tearing at Jon's cloak, biting through the thickest fur. Ghost hunched against it, ears flattened. His breath plumed white. Jon stepped as close to the northern edge as he dared. His stomach lurched when he peered over. The toe of his boot sat above nothing but a sheer fall that could swallow a castle. You're mad, he told himself. The wind snatched the words away. He closed his eyes. Come, he thought. Not in words, not exactly. In feeling. In the tug he'd come to know at the back of his mind. In the ache of absence. In the memory of heat and the rush of air. The bond answered. A shadow detached itself from the greater shadow of the forest, hurtling upward. For a heartbeat, Jon thought the wall itself moved, that the ice was rising in some terrible, slow avalanche. Then Skyrender's head cleared the edge. The dragon clung to the northern face, claws sunk deep into ice. His wings were folded tight against his sides, keeping him flush with the wall. Frost rimed the edges of his scales. His eyes burned. You're insane, Jon whispered, not sure whether he meant himself or the beast or both. Skyrender climbed higher, dragging himself until his foreclaws gripped the very lip of the wall. He did not haul himself fully onto the walkway. Jon had made it clear even in their clumsy mental exchanges that the black-clad men could not see him yet. Still, his presence towered. His head rose above Jon's own, long neck arching, breath steaming in great, slow gusts that turned to ice crystals in the air. Jon reached out. His hand met warm scale at the same time the wall's cold seeped through his boots. The contrast made his skin tingle, as if he stood between two fires of very different kinds. Look at it, he said, nodding to the north. That's what we're here for. That's what they fear. Not you. Not yet. They don't even know to. Skyrender's gaze followed his. The dark expanse of forest lay ahead, vast and indifferent. Somewhere out there, cold blue eyes watched, though neither dragon nor boy could see them. Stay out there, Jon said. In the hills. Hunt. Watch. If something comes, he swallowed. If the dead walk like the stories say, you burn them. Skyrender hissed softly, a promise. Ghost pressed against Jon's leg, nose brushing his hand on the dragon's scale. For a moment, boy, wolf, and dragon all touched, the wall a spine beneath them. A new power in the north, Jon thought, feeling the truth of it settle around him like a cloak. Not his alone, never his alone, but bound to him all the same. Down in the yard, men cursed and laughed and cursed again, unaware of the shadow clinging to the ice above their heads. Beyond the wall, in the darkness that belonged to no man's kingdom, something cold turned its face toward the faint, strange warmth blooming on the edge of the world. The first time Jon called Skyrender in battle, it was less choice than necessity. They were only meant to range a little way beyond the wall. A training sortie, Thorne Smallwood had said, "Show the new boys the forest's teeth." 3 brothers in black led them, men who'd ridden far and seen much. Jon had been glad for it. He wanted to see the world ghost scented every day from the top of the wall. Snow fell thick and heavy, muffling sound. The trees crowded close, their branches sagging under white burdens. Ghost moved ahead, a streak of pale in the dimness, his body language alert but not yet alarmed. "Keep your wits about you," Smallwood muttered, "and for the love of the old gods and the new, listen if I tell you to run." They found the bodies near dusk. 2 men in black, frozen under a thin crust of snow, their throats torn out, their eyes wide and filmed with ice. Their swords lay nearby, blades rimed with frost. The 3rd brother was nowhere to be seen. "Benjen's range came through here," Smallwood said tightly. "These are his men." The world seemed to tilt, just a little. "Sire," one of the others said, "we should go back. Tell the Lord Commander." "We will," Smallwood snapped, "after we check for survivors." Ghost's hackles rose all at once. The direwolf's lips peeled back in a snarl, teeth bared, a line of hair standing up in a ridge along his spine. "Ghost," Jon said. The forest exhaled. Snow fell from branches in soft plumes. The temperature, already brutal, plunged. Jon's breath froze in his nose. They came out of the trees with the slow, implacable inevitability of a tide. Wights. Jon had never seen one, but there was no mistaking them. Flesh gray and torn, clothes frozen to their bodies, eyes shining with an uncanny blue that was not light so much as absence of it. One was missing an arm. The ragged sleeve swung as it walked. Another dragged a broken leg, but the limb moved all the same. "Back!" Smallwood shouted. "Circle up!" Steel hissed free. The recruits stumbled into a rough ring, blades shaking. Ghost lunged forward, putting himself between Jon and the dead. The first wight hit him like a falling tree. Ghost's jaws closed on its arm. Bones cracked, but the thing did not scream. It turned its head toward the direwolf, fingers clawing. Jon moved without thinking. Long claw. Mormont's gift, Valyrian steel recently placed in his hands, whispered from its sheath. The blade felt lighter than air, like thought given form. He brought it down in a clean, 2-handed arc. The wight's neck parted as if it had been made of water. His head fell, blue eyes still burning. The body staggered forward 3 more steps, then collapsed. "Fire!" Smallwood bellowed. "They're afraid of fire." No one had brought torches. The snowfall made lighting anything a struggle. Men cursed, fumbling with flint and steel. Another wight lunged at Jon. Ghost slammed into it, teeth tearing at long-dead sinew. Jon's sword arm moved again, muscle and steel and fear in concert. For each that fell, 2 more seemed to step from the trees. Panic clawed at the back of his throat. This was not a story. This was not old Nan growling by the hearth. This was cold fingers reaching for his skin, for his eyes, for his throat. Ghost yelped. A wight had hold of his hind leg, fingers digging into fur and flesh. More dead hands reached, grabbing, pulling. Jon's mind buckled. Skyrender, he thought. Not in a word, not exactly. In a desperate, wild flare of need. In the bright, sharp image of dragonfire washing over snow. In the remembered warmth of scales against his skin. The bond snapped tight. The forest shook. A sound like distant thunder rolled overhead, growing louder, closer. The wind changed, gusting in sharp blasts that flung snow sideways. Branches groaned. Somewhere, a tree snapped with a crack like a breaking bone. The wights hesitated. They did not look up. Their eyes stayed on the living, on the heat they craved and hated and hungered for. But something in the air changed, and even dead flesh could feel it. 7 bloody hells, Smallwood whispered, staring at the sky. Skyrender tore through the clouds. He was a dark bulk at first, a shape that made the already narrow world feel smaller. As he dropped, details sharpened. The curve of horns, the flash of claws, the white streaks along his neck. Snow spiraled madly around him, whipped by the force of his descent. He hit the clearing not with his body but with his breath. His jaws opened. Jon had seen Skyrender's fire on stone, on mortar, on small, careful tests. He had not seen it like this. The flame that poured from the dragon's throat was not red and orange. It was white at its heart, so bright Jon's eyes watered, fringed with tendrils of darkness that writhed like shadows made liquid. It roared across the snow in a wide, sweeping arc. Where it touched wights, they did not burn in the way meat does. They flared, briefly, in a strange, ghostly light, the blue in their eyes pulsing once like a heartbeat. Then they dissolved. Flesh, bone, cloth, all crumbled into drifting ash that fell onto the snow and vanished. The fire hit trees. Bark blackened, branches cracked, sap hissed. It hit the ground. Snow flash melted, then refroze at the edges, leaving a steaming, muddy scar across the clearing. Jon stood in the eye of the blaze's path, only because Skyrender had bent it. Heat washed over him without burning. It curled around him, around Ghost pressed against his leg, leaving them untouched while the dead around them disintegrated. The last wight reached for him as it fell apart, fingers clawing at air. Jon watched its blue eyes flicker and go out. Silence crashed down after the roar. Steam rose in great plumes where the fire had passed. The remaining trees creaked, shedding clumps of snow. Men panted, chests heaving, blades slack in their hands. Skyrender landed at the edge of the clearing with a thump that shook the ground. The dragon lowered his head, eyes locking onto Jon's. Steam curled from his nostrils. His chest rose and fell in slow, heavy breaths. Jon stepped forward as if in a trance. Longclaw hung at his side, forgotten for the moment. Ghost moved with him, brushing flank against his knee. He reached up and laid his hand on Skyrender's muzzle. "Good," he said hoarsely. "Good boy." Skyrender rumbled, a sound that vibrated through Jon's arm. Behind him, someone dropped a sword. The clatter jolted Jon back into the present. He turned. The men of the Night's Watch were staring. Smallwood's face was a study in contradictions. Awe, terror, calculation, fear. One of the recruits had fallen to his knees in the snow, eyes wide, lips moving in what might have been prayer. Another made the sign of the seven on his chest with trembling fingers. What is that?" one whispered. "A dragon." Another answered, voice thin. "That's impossible." Jon squared his shoulders. "This is Skyrender," he said. His voice sounded distant in his own ears. "He's mine." The clearing held the words for a heartbeat, as if trying to decide their weight. Then Smallwood spat into the steaming snow. "I don't know whether you've brought us salvation or doom, Snow," he said. "But either way, the old bear will want to see this." Jeor Mormont's chamber smelled of smoke, old paper, and the stale feathers of ravens. Jon stood before the Lord Commander's desk, Longclaw at his hip, Ghost at his side. He felt younger than he had in months, as if he'd been peeled back to the boy who'd first ridden through Castle Black's gate. Mormont had his back to him, looking out the narrow window slit at the dark line of trees beyond the wall. His hands rested on the stone sill, big and scarred. His bearskin cloak hung heavy from his shoulders. "You should have told me," he said at last. Jon swallowed. "Would you have believed me?" Mormont snorted. "I've seen things in the north that would make a maester piss himself and call it a burst pipe. A boy with a dragon would not have been the strangest." He turned. His eyes were very tired. "How?" he asked. No accusation in it. Just that one word, carrying the weight of a world that did not have room for dragons anymore. Jon told him. Not everything. Not Bran's dreams or the woman in Luwin's scroll or the voice of the roots. But he spoke of the egg under Winterfell, of the hatching in his room, of the bond that had grown since, of fire that healed as well as burned, of leaving Skyrender hidden, and of the dragon's refusal to stay. Mormont listened without interruption, only his fingers tightening on the edge of the desk when Jon spoke of the wights. "And you called him," Mormont said, "with your mind." "I don't know what I called with," Jon admitted. "Only that he came." Mormont's gaze went to Ghost, then back. "A dire wolf, a dragon, dreams of things beyond the wall. You are a bundle of old wives' tales given flesh, Jon Snow." "I'm a bastard," Jon said quietly, "sworn to your service." "Aye," Mormont scratched at his beard. "And now you are a weapon as well." He walked to the window again, peering out. "I saw him," he said, "far off, like a shadow over the trees. I thought my eyes were playing tricks." Jon's heart thudded. "He won't attack without my call," he said quickly. "He's not some mindless beast. I gathered that when he didn't roast you with the rest of those dead men," Mormont replied dryly. "The question is not whether he is mindless, Snow. The question is who, in the end, commands that mind. You or something older, hungrier, and less inclined to keep its talons sheathed." Jon had no answer. Mormont turned fully, planting his hands on the desk. "The world will not thank us for this," he said. "South of the neck, they'll shit themselves in fear or delight. Kings will want to own your dragon, Snow. Queens will want to march behind it. The Citadel will want to cut it open and see if its guts match their books. I won't let them," Jon said. Heat rose in him that had nothing to do with Skyrender. "He's not theirs." "He's not yours either," Mormont said, not unkindly. "Not wholly. No more than Ghost is. No more than the North is Old Nan's." He studied Jon a long moment. "We stand on the wall," he said at last. "Our duty is to the realm of men, all men, even the ones who'd rather cut our throats than share a fire. That duty does not change because an old story flies again." Jon nodded, throat tight. "I understand." "Do you?" Mormont's gaze hardened. "Then understand this. I will not send word south. Not yet. The last time dragons and the Night's Watch tangled, too many of my brothers died in the name of someone else's war. Until I know what comes from the north, I won't invite Southron squabbles into it." Relief flooded Jon so fast it made his knees weak. "Thank you, my Lord Commander." "Don't thank me." Mormont sank into his chair with a groan. "I am a tired old man, and a dragon is too heavy a thing to throw onto the board when we already play with our backs to the ice." He picked up a quill, then set it down again. "You will train this creature," he said. "You will learn what it can do. You will keep it out of sight unless I say otherwise. And if the dead come in numbers that our steel and fire cannot hold." His eyes met Jon's. "You will burn them from the sky." "Yes," Jon said. Mormont nodded, satisfied. "Then go, before I remember that any sane commander would chain you to the rookery and feed your beast nothing but old ravens." Jon almost smiled. As he turned to go, Mormont's voice stopped him one last time. "And Snow." "Yes. If you are two worlds," the old bear said quietly, "then remember which one you stand on when the time comes to choose." The free folk saw Skyrender too. Word of a dragon over the wall spread through their camps with the speed of wildfire and the distortion of a dozen tongues. Some called it an omen. Some called it a sign that the gods of the Kneelers had grown teeth again. Some said it was a trick, a great black crow with wings of smoke and mirrors. Mance Rayder listened to them all. He stood at the edge of his largest camp, where tents and crude wooden halls sprawled between ancient stones. A great fire burned in the center, fed by logs dragged from miles away. Around it, chieftains and spearwives and raiders argued, their voices carrying. "Burned them like tinder," they say. Rattleshirt crowed, bones clacking on his armor. Dead ones went up in a puff, and then the snow was all steam. I'd like to see a wall of dead stand against a thing like that. If it's real, Tormund Giantsbane snorted. I've pissed twice today, and both times it steamed. You gonna call my cock a dragon now? Laughter rippled through the gathered free folk. The fear in it was too loud. Ygritte stood near Tormund's elbow, eyes narrowed, staring north. Mance lifted a hand. The murmurs died. I've seen dragons, he said. That got their attention. Not close, he went on. Not like the Targaryen kings of old. But I was a crow once and I had eyes. I saw skulls in the king's city, big as wagons, black as midnight. Every man in the south swore no living dragon walked the earth. He looked up. Skyrender flew high that night, little more than a shadow against the stars. But Mance saw the shape of him, the way he moved, the way the very air seemed to ripple under his wings. That one's no skull, Mance said softly. That's flesh, scale, fire. So we go south, Rattleshirt said eagerly. Break our spears on dragons instead of dead men. Better a burning death than a cold one. Mance shook his head. You die all the same, and if the dragon burns the dead for the crows, he shrugged. I won't spit on anyone who keeps my children breathing one more winter. Then what? Tormund demanded. We sit and wait for your ice devils to come nibble our toes while the crow boy plays at being Dragon Lord? Mance's eyes narrowed. We watch, he said. We learn. We see whether the dragon belongs to the wall or to the fire that's coming from across the sea. He glanced north, where the others walked unseen. And we remember, he added, that power cuts whatever way it pleases. Dragon or no, the wall's just as much a prison as it is protection. The fire crackled. Above it, Skyrender wheeled, a dark crescent across the stars. A new power moved in the north, one that did not belong wholly to crow or king or wildling. It belonged, for now, to a boy on a wall of ice, a wolf at his side, and a dragon that had learned to howl like both beast and storm. The sun bled itself out slowly over the horizon, streaking the sky in colors that looked almost warm, orange, pink, a thin band of purple. The light touched the top of the wall and broke, scattering in 1,000 shards of color over ice. Jon stood there, boots planted, cloak snapping in the wind. Ghost sat solid at his side. The direwolf's ears tracked every subtle shift in the air, every creak of the wall. His fur glowed faintly in the dying light. Beyond the edge, Skyrender glided. He'd grown into the sky with a speed that unsettled even Jon. Each week seemed to add another span to his wings, another coil of muscle to his frame. When he circled now, his shadow ran long over the forest, a dark question mark on the snow. He flew easily, riding the currents that rose along the wall's face. His body tilted with practiced grace. Now and then he flapped, more for the joy of it than necessity, sending gusts of wind tearing up the side of the ice. Jon watched him and felt the bond between them hum. Behind him, Castle Black went about its cramped, weary business. Men stomped their feet and cursed the cold. Fires were lit. Stew was ladled into bowls. Yoren told some filthy tale to a new batch of sullen recruits. Old Nan's stories walked the yard in the shapes of dead men and dragons. Ahead of him, the north stretched vast and indifferent, dotted with secrets and threats and the slow, creeping march of an enemy that did not care about crowns. You feel it too, Jon said quietly. Ghost tilted his head. Skyrender banked as if in answer. The game's changing, Jon went on. They don't know it yet. South of here, they're still counting gold and names. But up here, he let the thought trail off. The wind tugged at his hair. The wall hummed under his boots. Somewhere far to the north, the others turned their heads toward this new warmth edging their realm. A new power in the north, Jon said, half to himself, half to whatever old gods listened in frozen bark and flowing sap. And I'm standing in the middle of it like a fool with a sword. Ghost huffed. Skyrender roared. The sound rolled across the sky, echoing off the ice, off the stones of Castle Black, off the distant peaks of the Frostfangs. It was not a full, world-shaking roar yet, but it was more than the thin, rasping cry of a hatchling. Men in the yard looked up, shading their eyes. Some crossed themselves, some spat, some smiled, grim and small. On top of the wall, Jon smiled too. He didn't know yet what this power would cost, or where it would lead. He knew only that he would stand with it, and guide it if he could, and burn with it if he must. The North had always belonged to winter, Now, for the first time in living memory, it belonged to fire as well. The narrow sea was not narrow at all. It stretched around Daenerys Targaryen in endless folds of slate and silver, waves capped with white like claw marks across the surface. The sky matched it, a thick, unbroken gray that seemed to press low enough to touch. The wind tasted of rain and old salt and the faint, distant promise of land. Behind her, sails snapped and groaned, a forest of masts bearing her sigil, the three-headed red dragon on black. Before her, Dragonstone loomed from the mist, a dark mass of rock and ancient stone-carved dragons. Their stone necks craned eternally toward skies that had not seen true fire in 150 years. Except they had now. Because of her, Drogon screamed overhead, a harsh, tearing sound full of wild triumph. His vast wings beat the air, sending spray flying from the waves below. Regal and Viserion wheeled farther out, green and gold-white shapes cutting lazy arcs through the clouds. Daenerys lifted her face to the wind and closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the world move around her. The deck shifted under her feet, the ship creaked, the sea hissed and slapped. Drogon's presence pressed against her mind, a hot, familiar weight that grounded her as surely as any keel. "They know we are coming," Tyrion Lannister said behind her, voice thinned by the wind. "Half the realm, I'd wager, perhaps more, if the ravens have not yet frozen in their towers." She opened her eyes. Dragonstone grew larger with each heartbeat, its towers and battlements resolving from the fog like something called up from memory. She had never set foot on Westeros, yet this place burned in her mind from Viserys stories and the Targaryen histories. The first foothold, the first stone in the long chain that had ended in fire and madness and exile. "And the other half?" she asked. "The other half pretends it hasn't heard," Tyrion said dryly. "Too busy squabbling over scraps of what was once yours to notice that the feast may be about to end." A cry split the air that was not Drogon's. Daenerys turned sharply. A raven veered toward them, black feathers streaked with white as if dipped in snow. It flew true despite the wind, wings beating a steady rhythm. It did not aim for the mast or for the rigging, came for her. Missandei's hand brushed her elbow. "Khaleesi, it's marked," Tyrion observed. "See the band on its leg?" It landed on the rail near her, claws clutching the slick wood, artificial weight tinkling as the metal band shifted. Its eyes were bright and black, beak opening for breath. It stared at her with unnerving directness. She reached out, fingers steady. The raven did not flinch when she unfastened the tiny leather cylinder from its leg. The parchment inside was stiff from cold. She unrolled it carefully, leaning toward the weak lantern light as the wind snatched at the edges. The writing was cramped and sharp. The seal, cracked by travel, had borne a black wax impression in the shape of a sword. "From the Night's Watch," Tyrion said, craning to read. "I'd know that miserable handwriting anywhere. Maester Aemon taught half the Citadel how to be old and stubborn." Daenerys scanned the lines. Her eyes caught on words and snagged, dragged forward like cloth on nails. "Dead do not stay dead. Wall thin. Wights. Walkers. Old stories. And then, Dragon of Winterfire." Her heart kicked. "Read it aloud," Tyrion said. "If you would, your grace." She did. It was not a neat report. It read like the field note of a man who had seen too much and slept too little, Quill scratching desperately to pin down what sanity said could not be true. The dead rising in the snow, blue eyes and blades of ice, brothers turned into enemies by a touch of cold. Fire working, strangely, some flames sputtering, others flaring white. Men dying, men not staying dead. And above it all, a dragon, black as night with veins like ice. She read, voice steady despite the churn in her gut. "Its fire is not like yours, they say. It burns white and dark at once, and the dead fall to ash where it passes. The wall has always stood between us and the long night, but there is another shield now that moves in the sky. It answers to Jon Snow." She stopped. The name hung there between them, made of ink and wind and the soft, questioning croak of the raven on the rail. "Snow," Tyrion said softly. A Northman's bastard name, but not always. Daenerys's throat felt tight. Explain. In the north, Tyrion said, bastards take the surnames of their regions. Snow, rivers, flowers, sand. His mouth twisted briefly. Storm. A man called Snow is almost certainly not a Targaryen. Almost. They say he is Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, she continued, eyes dropping again to the letter. That he rides a dragon, and that the wildlings call him the wolf above the wall. That he is Stark's blood, but his flame is not theirs. Lord Commander? Tyrion frowned. Last time I was there, Jeor Mormont had that honor, and I seem to recall promising his steward I'd piss off the edge of the world in his name. That was some years ago? Missandei ventured gently. Tyrion grimaced. Time does insist on passing, yes. Daenerys's mind had already leapt ahead. A dragon. Another dragon. Not of her blood, not of her lineage, raised not on stories of old Valyria but under snow and stone and the watchful eyes of old gods. He answers to Jon Snow, the letter said, but whose blood runs in his veins. Send word back, she said. Tyrion blinked. Already? Yes. Her grip tightened on the parchment. Write that Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen, rightful queen of the Seven Kingdoms, has heard of their peril, that I will treat with this Jon Snow at Dragonstone. And that if what they say is true, about the dead, about this winter that walks, I may lend them fire. And the dragon? Tyrion asked quietly. Daenerys looked toward Drogon, who dipped lower, as if sensing her attention. His shadow slid across the waves like a dark hand. Fire meets fire, she said. If he truly has one, we will see whether his burns as brightly as mine. The raven ruffled its feathers, as if shaken by some distant echo of dragon wings, then launched itself back into the gray sky, bearing the weight of her reply. The ravens never stopped. Since the dead had begun to walk in earnest and Skyrender's shadow had crossed the haunted forest, messages rained down on Winterfell like snow. Pleas from small lords who'd seen their dead rise at their own gates. Demands from southern kings who wanted dragons harnessed to their banners. Curious, half-mocking missives from lords who'd heard whispers and wanted confirmation of old women's tales. Sansa handled most of them. Jon was more comfortable with walls and watches, with steel and cold. His sister, Lady of Winterfell by right and hard-earned cunning, knew how to weigh ink and seal. This raven was different. He could feel it before he unrolled the parchment, just from the way Maester Wolkin's fingers were careful and tense, from the way Sansa's blue eyes tracked his movements, from the way the hall itself seemed to hush. It bears the three-headed dragon, Wolkin had said quietly when the bird arrived. Red wax. The seal is old, very old, reused perhaps from some chest. Or saved, Sansa had said, for when a Targaryen came again. Now, standing at the center of the hall, Jon broke the seal. The words were measured, formal, not the frantic scrawl of a man writing from the edge of the world, but the careful diplomacy of a queen who knew what power she wielded. Jon Snow, Lord Commander of the Night's Watch once, now called King in the North by some and traitor by others. Word of your deeds has reached even across the sea. You burn the dead. You ride a dragon. You have seen the long night with your own eyes. I have dragons too. He could almost hear her voice in the script, the iron certainty under the courtesy. I do not know if I believe all that is said. Men lie, stories grow. But I know this. I will not sit idle while a darkness rises that does not care for thrones or banners. Come to Dragonstone. Bring your truth. Bring your dragon if you dare. We will see whose fire the night fears more. Daenerys Targaryen. He read it twice, then looked up. The hall waited, Manderleys and Glovers and Umbers. All the proud, half-frozen stubbornness of the north gathered in one place. Torches spat and hissed. The long fires roared. Smoke coiled lazily toward the rafters. Sansa watched him. Well, Lyanna Mormont demanded, not waiting for older men to find their tongues. Will you go? Murmurs rose at once. Some angry, some fearful, some full of brittle hope. "A Targaryen queen," Lord Glover scoffed. "With dragons. We bled under her father, under his dragonfire. We bent the knee once and paid for it in burning. You'd have us do it again." "Aye, but this time the fire might be burning corpses instead of castles," Davos Seaworth said from Jon's right. The Onion Knight had a knack for cutting through noise. "I've seen a wight. I've watched Skyrender burn them. If there's more fire to be had against that, I'd not spit on it." "We don't know what she wants," Sansa said. Her voice was calm, but her hands were white-knuckled on the arms of her chair. "Not truly. She speaks of helping, but she's not crossed the sea for charity. She'll want fealty, banners, the North bending the knee again to a southern ruler." Jon felt their eyes on him, their weight. He thought of the wall, of Skyrender's white and black flame turning dead men to drifting ash. He thought of the letters they'd seen from farther north, tales of the White Walkers probing, testing, growing bolder. He thought of the way the nights felt longer now, even when the days weren't shorter. "We can't fight this alone," he said. "Not the Walkers, not their numbers. I've seen what Skyrender can do, and it's not enough. Not for the whole realm. If she has fire, 3 fires, that can do the same." "You don't know that," Lord Glover said. "Her dragons may not burn the same as yours." "No," Jon agreed. "I don't. That's why I have to go and see." Lyanna snorted. "You're the king in the north. Kings don't go running when summoned like dogs." "I'm not a king," Jon said, and the words, spoken aloud, felt like a relief he'd denied himself for too long. "I never wanted the title. You gave it to me because I knew the dead, because I had a dragon, because we were desperate." He looked around the hall. "I'm just a man who's seen what's coming. If I have to sail to Dragonstone and kneel to make sure we have a chance against that, I'll do it. Titles won't matter when the dead are walking through this hall." Silence again, colder, sharper. Sansa's gaze was ice blue and steady. "You would kneel." Jon thought of kneeling before no one and nothing, of clinging to pride in the face of extinction. He thought of Skyrender's weight against his back, of Ghost's flank pressing into his leg, of Bran's visions whispered in letters from the south, walls of ice cracking under dragon shadow. "I would bargain," he said finally. "I would listen. I would make her see what we face. If that ends in kneeling, I'll decide then whether my pride is worth your lives." He met Sansa's eyes, then Lyanna's, then those of the other lords. "You made me your king because you trusted me," he said. "Trust me now when it matters most." Ghost's muzzle nudged his hand. The direwolf's red eyes reflected the firelight. Far above, through layers of stone and wood and sky, Jon felt Skyrender's attention twitch, as if some part of the dragon understood that their path was turning toward another fire. Dragonstone's shore was all black stone and jagged teeth. The beach seemed to crawl up toward the looming castle, its volcanic pebbles shifting underfoot with the soft grind of glass. The sea crashed against dragon-carved rocks, sending spray up in tall, white sheets. The sky was close and heavy, clouds thick as wool. Daenerys stood at the tide line, boots firm on the slick stones. Behind her, the Unsullied held their lines without needing to be told, spears upright, shields resting light but ready. Dothraki riders watched from higher on the slope, horses blowing steam in the cool air. Missandei stood at her left shoulder, Tyrion at her right, Grey Worm a pace behind. Drogon's shadow rolled over them as he passed overhead, a vast, moving blot that made men duck their heads even now. His roar shook spray from the rocks. Rhaegal and Viserion circled farther out over the waves, green and gold streaks against the gray. The northern ship approached the shallows, its stark banner snapping in the wind. The hull was thicker than most southern craft, built to plow through ice and storm. Men crowded its deck, bundled in furs and leather, their faces pale against dark hair. A white shape moved at the prow. "Is that..." one of the Dothraki began. "A wolf," Tyrion supplied. "A very large one." The gangplank dropped with a clatter. Men descended first, Davos Seaworth among them, face weathered and wary. Northern guards with gray cloaks and eyes full of suspicion followed. Then Jon Snow came down. He wore black and gray, no crown, no bright ornaments. His hair was tied back at his nape, dark curls damp with sea spray. A thick cloak hung from his shoulders, trimmed with fur. A sword with a direwolf's head for a pommel rode his hip. He looked smaller than she'd expected. In the letters, in the stories, he was tall as a king, shadowed by dragon wings, a figure out of legend standing atop ice. Here, walking down a wet plank toward her, he was just a man. Broad-shouldered, yes. Scarred, if the faint line along his neck meant what she suspected. But human. His eyes met hers across the space between. Gray. Stark gray. Eddard's eyes, her father's old enemy. Framed in a face that was not quite Stark's, either. The white wolf leapt down after him, landing with a soft, heavy thud on the slick stones. It shook itself once, sending droplets flying, then fell in at his side. "Your Grace," Davos said, stepping forward, bowing with a stiffness that spoke more of sore joints than lack of respect. "May I present Jon Snow?" The air changed. It was subtle at first, a stilling of gulls' cries, the sudden hush of the Dothraki behind her, the way Drogon's roar, mid-screech, cut off in a low, questioning rumble. Daenerys felt it a heartbeat before she heard anything. A prickle along her skin, as if the sky had just taken in a sharp breath. Far above the cloud layer, something answered Drogon's dominance with its own. The clouds tore, a shadow dropped through. For a moment, the sky was full of him. Skyrender came down like a falling piece of night, wings flared, tail lashing. His body was broader now, thicker through chest and shoulders, the cords of his neck standing out as he checked his descent. The veins of pale that laced his scales caught what light there was, glowing faintly like lightning buried in stone. He roared. The sound was not the raw, ragged cry of his hatching, nor the half-formed howl he'd learned from Ghost. It was something larger, fuller. It shook the water, sending ripples racing outward from the shore. Stones vibrated underfoot. Men flinched, hands going to weapons before their minds caught up and told them how useless steel would be against that. Drogon reacted like a struck nerve. He screamed in answer, wings snapping back as he banked hard, arrowing toward the intruder. Fire licked at the back of his throat. Regal and Valyrian broke their lazy circles, eyes blazing, moving to flank. "Hold," Daenerys snapped, hand shooting up before the Unsullied could so much as shift their grips. Her dragons did not heed the word, but they heard something in it. Saw her posture, perhaps, the set of her jaw. Drogon did not unleash flame at once. He angled to meet Skyrender, wings beating harder, throat rumbling. Skyrender checked his own flight, beating to hold height. He did not dive at Drogon. He did not bare his teeth or flare his claws. He turned slightly, presenting his side rather than his throat, a position that was neither full submission nor open challenge. His eyes, white gold rimmed in pale blue, locked onto Daenerys. She was used to being stared at by dragons. It was never comfortable. There was too much in their gaze, too much that was not quite animal and not quite human. Drogon's attention was heat and hunger and fierce, simple possessiveness. Mine, everything mine, you mine, world ours. Skyrender's attention felt different, older in some ways, or perhaps not older but layered. She felt winter in it, frost on skin, the silence of snow-covered woods. But under that, fire as fierce as any she'd known. A twin song of opposites. "Khaleesi," Missandei whispered, voice soft with awe. "It's beautiful." "That's one word for it," Tyrion muttered. Jon had gone very still. He stood on the stones with his cloak whipped around his legs, Ghost pressed close. His hand did not go to his sword. Instead it lifted, almost unconsciously, palm open. "Easy," he called. His voice carried more than it had any right to, wind taking it and flinging it upward. "Skyrender, easy, down." Drogon snarled, a hot, furious sound. He swept past Skyrender, close enough that their wings nearly tangled, and circled back, body language shouting mine, mine, mine. Skyrender watched him pass. Then he folded his wings and dropped. The impact shuddered through the ground. Pebbles jumped under Daenerys's boots. Men staggered, one Dothraki curse dying on his lips as he found himself staring at a talon bigger than his head. Steam hissed where Skyrender's claws sank into the wet, cold stones, turning moisture to vapor. Up close, he was larger than Drogon. Not by much. Drogon had grown in the warm skies of Essos and over the Slaver's Bay, fed on herds and enemies for years, but enough that the difference pressed at the edges of Daenerys's perception. Skyrender's wings, when folded, overlapped more. His chest was broader, his neck thicker. If Drogon was a spear, Skyrender was a hammer. Ghost padded forward, unconcerned, and pressed his white shoulder against the dragon's foreleg. The contrast, wolf and dragon, fur and scale, snow and fire, was so stark that Daenerys's breath caught. "Seven save us," someone whispered behind her, a Westerosi voice. No one moved. Drogon circled low, growling, wings stirring the air in great, heavy strokes. Regal and Valyrian held higher, flanking, unsure. Their necks arched, eyes narrowed. Daenerys felt their agitation through the bond. Space, they demanded. Threat, burn, kill, challenge? "No," she murmured. "Wait, watch." Jon stepped forward. He moved with the careful confidence of a man who knew exactly how dangerous it was to approach a dragon and had done it anyway. His boots sank slightly into the slick stones. His cloak flapped around his legs. Ghost stayed where he was, a pale anchor against Skyrender's dark bulk. Daenerys watched the way Skyrender's head lowered, the way his pupils widened as Jon neared. The dragon's breath gusted, hot and sharp and edged with some mineral tang she could not name. Jon stopped at the dragon's muzzle. He laid his hand there, flat against the scale, fingers splayed. The world seemed to pause. Daenerys's own palm tingled in answer, remembering the first time she had touched Drogon. The first time the heat had surged up her arm and not burned her. "You're late," Jon said under his breath. "You scared half the island." Skyrender huffed. The tension in the air loosened a fraction. Pebbles clicked as men shifted their weight, testing their balance in this new reality. One of the Unsullied let out a breath he must have been holding as long as Daenerys. "Impressive entrance," Tyrion said quietly, though his knuckles were white on the rock he used as a cane. "You Northmen do enjoy your theatrics." Daenerys stepped forward at last. The wind caught her cloak, whipping it out behind her. Her boots crunched on the stones. Drogon dropped lower, as if to shield her, then subsided when she laid a calming hand on his neck without breaking stride. "Jon Snow," she said, "you were summoned to Dragonstone." He turned from Skyrender and faced her fully. "I received your summons," he said, "and I brought my truth." His gaze flicked briefly to Drogon, then back. There was no awe there, not the way most men looked at her dragons. Wariness, yes. Calculation. A flicker of recognition that she could not place. She let her eyes move over him, taking his measure. The set of his jaw, the scars at his throat and on his hands. The way he held himself as if ready to meet a blow from any direction. "And your dragon," she said, nodding at Skyrender. He looked back at the beast, and in that glance she saw affection as deep and complicated as her own for Drogon. Worry too. Responsibility. The same weight that had settled on her shoulders the day her eggs cracked. "Fire meets fire, your grace," he said. She did not smile, though the words pleased her in some quiet, dark place. "We shall see which burns hotter before this is done." The steps to Dragonstone's great hall seemed steeper than Daenerys remembered. Perhaps it was the weight of eyes on them as she climbed. Unsullied standing silent at their posts, Dothraki riders on higher ledges, Missandei's quiet support at her back, Tyrion's sardonic watchfulness at her shoulder. Or perhaps it was the man climbing beside her, cloak brushing stone, wolf at his heel. The dragons followed above, unable to resist shadowing their riders' movements. Drogon flew closest, occasionally gliding so low his wingtip brushed the castle's outer parapet, knocking loose a spray of old stone dust. Skyrender kept higher, as if wary of forcing a confrontation in too narrow a space. Regal and Valyrian wove between, uncertain which fire to lean toward. "You trained him," Daenerys said after a few steps of silence. The wind tugged at her hair. She did not look at Jon, but her peripheral vision caught the way he turned his head slightly at her words. "Skyrender. No one trains a dragon," Jon said. "Not truly. You will argue with them, and hope they listen." Her mouth almost twitched. "That, at least, we agree on." Ghost paused ahead, sniffing a carved gargoyle with suspicion. Skyrender's shadow passed over the stone, and the gargoyle's dragon face looked briefly alive. "How long have you had him?" she asked. Jon hesitated. "Since before the dead rose in earnest," he said. "Before I became Lord Commander. Before I died." She stopped. The wind howled around them, a brief, sharp gust. Drogon's roar rolled overhead in restless echo. "You died," she repeated. Jon grimaced. "Once. I got better." She turned to face him fully. "Explain," she said. It was not a request. He met her eyes without flinching. "My own brothers killed me," he said. "They thought I'd betrayed the Watch, the wildlings, the North. I bled out in the snow." Ghost howled. "Skyrender." His gaze flicked up briefly toward the dragon shadow. "He burned the men who'd done it, and a red woman with a strange god spoke words over me, and I woke up with a scar and a second chance I don't entirely understand." Daenerys searched his face for mockery, for some hint of exaggeration. She found none. In another life, she had walked into a fire and come out with dragons clinging to her skin like new-woken children. She had seen men burned to ash by Drogon's breath. She had watched slaves follow her with eyes that shone as if she truly were the breaker of chains they named her. Death and fire and rebirth were not strangers to her. "Then we both owe something to flames," she said, "and to gods who meddle." His smile, quick and rueful, flickered and was gone. "Perhaps." They resumed the climb. "Why did you come?" she asked after a moment. "Truly. You read the letter from the Watch," he said. "You know what's moving in the north. The dead don't care about your father's throne or mine. I saw what Skyrender's fire does to them. It destroys them completely. I need to know if your dragons can do the same." "And if they can?" she asked. "Then I will ask you to bring them north," he said simply. "To fight, to burn, to help us hold the wall, or what's left of it when they come in force." "And what will you give me?" Her tone sharpened. "I did not cross the narrow sea to be your sword and nothing more." He looked out over the Black Sea, where their ships rocked at anchor. "I don't have much to give," he said. "Only the north, only my name, only whatever weight there is in the stories people tell about me. I can promise you this. If you stand with us in the long night, I will stand with you when day comes. I will tell every man and woman from White Harbor to the Shadow Tower that we owe you our lives." "And crowns?" she pressed. "Will you tell them to bend their knees?" The wind gusted again. Ghost's fur ruffled. Jon's jaw tightened. "If they're still alive to kneel," he said, "I'll tell them to at least hear you speak." Her patience thinned. "I ask for oaths, Jon Snow, not for polite audiences. And I ask for survival, Daenerys Targaryen," he shot back. Her name on his tongue startled her, stripped of titles and thrown like a spear. "We may both have to settle for less than we want." They locked eyes a long moment, two flints striking. Overhead, Drogon and Skyrender wheeled, fire against fire, neither bowing yet. The throne of Dragonstone was carved into the living rock, all black claws and jagged backs and the suggestion of scales. Daenerys sat on it, spine straight, chin lifted. The stone beneath her was cold even through layers of cloth and leather, but she did not let it show. Targaryens did not shiver in their own halls. Jon Snow stood below, at the base of the short flight of steps. Ghost lay close enough that a slight shift would brush his leg. red eyes taking in every movement in the room. The table map at the room's center lay between them, Westeros carved and painted in painstaking detail. The north was a smear of white and gray, the wall a thin, pale line. Someone had once carved dragons into the seas, tiny, curling shapes that looked almost childish now. "Our ancestors built this place," Daenerys said. "They carved dragons out of stone and made men kneel with the promise of fire. They united a fractured realm. And then they broke it," Jon said. She inclined her head a fraction. "Yes, they did. My father most of all. I have heard every story you would tell me about his madness, and more besides." She leaned forward slightly, hands resting on the stone arms of the throne. "I am not him." Jon's gaze held hers, steady. "Then you'll not roast men for speaking ill of you. That's a good start." Tyrion coughed, badly hiding a smile. Davos shifted his weight, discomfort plane. "I have burned men," Daenerys said, refusing to flinch away from the truth. "Tyrants, slavers, men who stood between me and the freedom of those they chained. I won't pretend I am gentle. I have dragons, Jon Snow. They are not made for mercy." "I know what dragons are made for," he said quietly. "I've seen it." His eyes flicked to Skyrender's shadow, passing briefly across the high windows. "The question is what you choose to do with them." "What I choose," she repeated. "You speak as if you had any knowledge of that weight." "I do," he said simply. Silence stretched. "You asked what I'd give you," he went on. "The North remembers the Mad King. They remember what dragonfire did to their kin. They will not bend easily, not even with me asking. But I will tell them this. You came when we needed you. You did not sit safe on an island of stone while the dead marched. You burned for them. You bled for them. If that is the truth, the North will listen." "And if they won't?" she asked. "Then I will stand with you anyway," he said, "because I've seen the dead, and I'd rather stand with dragons against them than with honor among bones." Davos sighed softly, Tyrion's brow furrowed, calculating. "You put much faith in fire," Daenerys observed. "I put faith in what I've seen turn wights to ash," he replied. "I've seen your dragons from a distance. Their fire burns like the old stories. Red, gold. Skyrender's is..." He hesitated, searching for words. "Different. Show me," she said. The cave beneath Dragonstone smelled of salt and old secrets. Torchlight licked at rough walls, throwing shadows that danced over ancient drawings. Crude figures marched along the stone, white shapes with blue eyes, surrounded by curling lines that might once have been meant as snow. Others showed men and women with swords raised, standing between those pale figures and something that could be taken for fire. Dragons, too, were scratched into the rock, some with 3 heads, some with 1. Some with lines like rays or bonds stretching from their mouths to stick figures below. "Your people?" Jon asked, hearing his own voice echo in the hollow space. "Perhaps," Daenerys said. "Or yours, or neither. Men leave marks. They do not always leave names." Ghost padded just inside the entrance, nostrils flaring. His hackles were up, not from threat but from the scent in the air that did not belong to stone. The wight snarled. It was bound with chains stolen from a ship's hold, limbs lashed tight, the cold in it leaking into the cave's air like smoke. Its eyes burned blue in the dimness, unnaturally bright. Its mouth worked around broken, blackened teeth, jaws clacking as it strained toward heat. "You kept it," Daenerys said, voice flat. "I needed you to see," Jon replied. "Stories can be denied. Paintings explained away. This keeps trying to kill us even after we've killed it." He stepped closer to the white, long claw drawn. The thing snapped at him as far as its bonds allowed. The sound of teeth on air made Daenerys' skin crawl. She had seen dead men before, slaves crucified along roads, bones left to bleach in the sun. They had never moved again. "You've seen enough," she began. "No," Jon said. He took another step. The white lunged as much as it could. Chains creaked. "Not yet." He swung Longclaw, The Valyrian steel blade bit through the wight's arm at the elbow, severing it cleanly. The limb fell, fingers still clawing. The stump did not bleed. The chains tightened with the twist of its body, bones creaking under the strain. Daenerys swallowed back bile. He let her look, let her see the way death did not mean rest here. Not for these. Then he nodded toward the wide opening he'd had carved into the rock earlier that day, where cold air breathed in from the cliffside. Now, he said. Skyrender's head filled the opening, horns scraping rock. His breath steamed in the cool air, gusts stirring torch flames. His eyes flickered to Jon, then to Daenerys, then to the chain thing on the cave floor. The white struggle turned frantic. It sensed the heat before it came, shrieking in a voice that hurt to hear, bones straining against iron. The severed arm on the ground scrabbled uselessly, fingers cutting grooves in the dirt. Skyrender, Jon said quietly. Burn. The dragon's chest expanded. Daenerys braced herself. She had stood near Drogon when he unleashed his fire on the calls. She knew the sound and feel of that. This was similar and not. Skyrender's flame came out narrow and controlled. At first, a focused stream that widened only as it left his jaws. The color of it was wrong. The center burned a fierce, almost painful white, like the heart of a smith's forge. Around it, darker flickers writhed. Shadows that weren't mere absence of light but seemed to drink it, to warp it. The fire struck the white. It did not ignite the way cloth or oil did. There was no blossom of orange, no blackening of flesh. Simply ceased. The white scream cut off mid-note. Its body went rigid, every limb arched, mouth gaping. Then it broke apart. Not in chunks, not in the messy way a body comes apart under steel, but in a drift of ash and dust that collapsed inward, then puffed outward on the breath of the flame. For a heartbeat, the air was full of fine gray motes, swirling like snow in reverse. Where the white had been, there was only a dark mark on the stone, already cooling. Daenerys realized she had taken a step back. Her hand was on Drogon's imagined neck, fingers flexed, a phantom reflex seeking a dragon that was not there. Slowly, she moved forward again. She knelt, hand hovering above the scorch mark. Heat radiated from it, but not as fiercely as she'd thought. Less than one of Drogon's full gouts would have left. You see, Jon said, fire, but not just fire. Whatever they are, whatever magic animates them. His flames unmake it completely. Drogon's don't? She asked, looking up. They burn the flesh, he said. The bone. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes there's something left. Something that crawls or wriggles. His jaw tightened. Not with this. Not with him. Skyrender's pupils were enormous now, drinking in the cave's dimness. The white veins in his scales seemed to glow faintly, echoing the strange flame he'd just unleashed. Daenerys looked at the drawings on the wall again. Dragons carved in simple lines. Figures of men between pale, cold shapes and curling suggestions of fire. Lines of connection. Two kinds of flame, she said softly. Two kinds of dragon. She turned to Jon. And you, Jon Snow? What kind of fire runs in you? His lips parted. For an instant, something like panic flickered in his eyes, quickly masked. That's something we're still learning, he said. By the time the sun began to sink toward the western sea, the dragons had grown restless. Drogon had never liked sharing a sky. In Meereen, he had flown above ships and cities like a king, his roar answering only his own reflection in windows and the frightened cries of men below. Regal and Viserion tolerated other things in their air, gulls, corvids, smoke. Drogon did not. Skyrender answered his every dominant sweep with one of his own. They danced above Dragonstone in wider and wider circles, testing each other's limits. Once Drogon dove, jaws open, teeth bared. Skyrender twisted aside with a maneuver that made Jon's stomach drop even from the balcony. He rolled in the air, wings folding slightly, letting Drogon's passage take him underneath, then flared again, rising to match height. Fire flickered at both their mouths and died unspent. They're going to fight, Daenerys said. Not yet, Jon replied. His fingers curled around the stone rail until his knuckles whitened. They're talking. Daenerys glanced at him. Is that what you call it? What do you call it when two powers size each other up and decide whether to tear or share? He asked. Diplomacy, Tyrion said dryly from behind them, or marriage, depending on the wine. Neither of them turned. The dragons wheeled. Drogon's scales caught the dying light and turned it molten, his red-black hide glowing like banked embers. Skyrender, by contrast, swallowed the light where his scales were darkest, the pale veins along his sides stark as scars. When they crossed in front of the sun, they both became silhouettes, wings cutting the disk into ragged shapes. They could kill each other, Daenerys said. Jon's jaw tightened. Not if we can help it. He stepped up onto the low lip of the balcony, ignoring the sharp, indrawn breath from Davos somewhere behind. The drop beyond was sheer, straight down to jagged rock and crashing sea. Skyrender, he shouted. The name cracked across the sky like a thrown stone. Dragon heads turned. Then Daenerys' voice joined his, before she had time to think about what she was doing. Drogon! The two cries mingled, rose, tangled in the wind. Two names, two claims. Drogon folded his wings, dropping a dozen yards in a heartbeat, then snapped them open again and turned toward her. Skyrender, after a single stubborn moment more of circling, followed. They listen to you, Jon said quietly. They listen, she corrected. Whether they obey is another matter. They came in slower this time. Drogon took the closer side, nearer the balcony, tail whipping idly as he held position, massive body bobbing with each breath. Skyrender hovered just beyond, wings beating more slowly, eyes flicking between queen and boy and each other. Daenerys stepped out onto the sliver of stone, the wind trying to tug her into the drop. Her palms were slick. She ignored it. Come, she said to Drogon, stretching out a hand. He lowered his head, nostrils flaring, breath hot enough to make her hair lift. She pressed her palm to his snout, feeling the roughness of scales, the familiar thrum of heat and strength. When she reached with her other hand, slower, toward Skyrender, she expected the dragon to recoil or snap. He did neither. He huffed, as if offended by her hesitation, then leaned in until his muzzle almost touched Drogon's. Their breath washed over her in alternating waves. Drogon's the normal, brutal furnace heat she knew, Skyrender's edged with that strange, icy tingle. Her skin prickled where they overlapped, as if caught between bonfire and snowstorm. You feel that? Jon asked low. Yes, she said. We're going to need both, he murmured, to fight what's coming. The dragons snorted, as if in amused agreement, then shoved at each other with their foreheads, a rough, oddly familiar gesture. Not quite affection, not quite aggression, something like brotherhood. Night pressed in against the walls of Dragonstone like a living thing. Rain lashed the windows, wind howling around the stone dragons perched on the towers. Thunder rolled in the distance, too far to be more than a low, constant growl. Inside, the map room was a pool of flickering light, candles guttering on the carved table, embers glowing in the hearth. Daenerys stood over Westeros, fingers resting lightly on the north. Snow was carved into the wood there, white paint flaking where age had taken its toll. Tiny trees had been chiseled along what once had been the line of the Wolfswood. The wall was a raised ridge of pale stone, its southern face smooth under her palm. We burned slavers together, she said. You and I, though separated by half a world. You freed them from chains. I freed them from their masters' whips. And still, they found new ways to bind themselves. Jon stood opposite her, his hands braced on the table's edge. He'd shed his cloak. The black leather beneath was damp at the shoulders, hair curling at his temples from the storm's touch. I freed some, he said, failed others. He tapped the wall with one finger. I thought this would be enough, he admitted. Stone and ice and oaths. I thought if we manned it, kept it strong, we could hold the line as men always had. He looked up. I was wrong. Men are often wrong, Daenerys said. Sometimes dragons are needed. He huffed softly. Dragons can be wrong too. She almost smiled. Perhaps. She traced a path from Dragonstone's carved point to the north, a line over seas and coasts and hills. In another life, she said, I would have landed in King's Landing first, burned Cersei Lannister from her stolen throne, raised my banners over the Red Keep while the great lords watched and decided whether to kneel or rebel. You still could, Jon said. She shook her head. Not if I've seen what you've shown me. Not if I know that while I play at Queen over Ashes, the dead are marching. Her finger paused over the neck. I hate that, she said, surprising herself with the rawness of it. I hate that this choice was taken from me, that I do not get to be only what I thought I was, conqueror, restorer, Targaryen queen. Jon's gaze tracked her hand, then rose to her face. I never wanted to be what they made me either, he said. Bastard, Lord Commander, King. I just wanted, he pulled in a breath, to do right by the people in front of me, to keep them alive. Thunder muttered again. Candle flames wavered. She studied him. If you had the choice, she asked quietly, would you give Skyrender up? Lose that power? Walk away from it? Live as just Jon Snow? He didn't answer at once. I can't pretend I haven't thought about it, he said finally. There are days I dream of it. No dragon, no dead, just Winterfell and simpler worries. He shook his head. But then I wake up, and I remember what's out there, and what he can do, and what I can do with him, and I can't wish it away. Not without wishing all those people who'll need that fire away, too. He met her eyes. What about you? Would you give up Drogon? Regal? Valyrian? No, she said without hesitation. I would not. Then we're both cursed, he said softly, and blessed, in ways that don't let us walk away. She let out a breath that was almost a laugh. Cursed and blessed. You sound like a septon and a wildling both. I'm told I'm two worlds, he said, mouth quirking. It fits. Silence settled between them, not empty but full. Outside, lightning flashed, briefly illuminating the dragons wheeling above the keep. For an instant, their shadows crossed the window, 3 and 1, tangled. Inside, Daenerys' hand closed over Jon's on the map. His fingers stiffened, then relaxed under hers. Fire meets fire, she said again, quieter now. We'll need both. And ice, he added. She thought of the cave drawings, of Bran's letters, mentioning three-eyed ravens and visions of dragons over snow, of Skyrender's breath turning death to nothing living. Yes, she said, and ice. The first time they flew together, the storm tried to stop them. Rain lashed at the dragon's wings, turning membranes slick. Wind clawed at their bodies, trying to shove them back toward the ground. Clouds boiled overhead, dark and full of hidden flashes. Drogon loved it. He soared into the teeth of the gale, roaring, wings beating with ferocious joy. Lightning forked behind him, turning his silhouette into a jagged, flaring shadow. Daenerys clung to the ridges of his neck, soaked to the bones, laughing despite herself. Skyrender took the sky more soberly. His wings beat with measured power, each stroke placed to fight the wind's push rather than simply defy it. His body moved with a predator's economy. No wasted motion, no unnecessary flourish. Jon leaned low over his neck, fingers tangled in the ridges along his spine, hair plastered to his forehead. Regal and Valyrian followed, delighted, threading between their larger cousins with youthful abandon. Dragonstone shrank below, its carved dragons and black stone falling away into mist. The sea became a restless, dark plain, flecked with white. Above, the clouds churned. Drogon broke through first, bursting into a brief, unexpected space of clear air. The world opened around them in a sudden, breathtaking circle, stormscapes below, stars and a bleeding sunset above. He screamed, exultant. Skyrender punched through a heartbeat later. His roar joined Drogon's, lower and threaded with that strange, almost metallic undertone that Daenerys was coming to associate with his ice fire. The two sounds twined, a harsh, wild harmony that made her skin prickle. Daenerys guided Drogon closer, until their wings almost brushed. Jon urged Skyrender to hold steady. For a moment, they flew side by side in that narrow window between storm and sky. Daenerys glanced across the gap. Jon's face was wet with rain, hair whipped back, eyes bright. He looked younger like this and older, alive in a way she had not yet seen on the ground. "How does it feel?" she shouted over the wind. He grinned, sudden and fierce. "Like I stole something from the gods," he called back. Lightning flickered below them, hidden by cloud. Far on the horizon, Daenerys thought she saw a faint glow that was not sunset. Cold, pale, wrong. "We'll steal more," she shouted. "For them." She nodded toward the distant north. He followed her gaze, his expression sobered. "Aye," he said, "for them." Drogon banked. Skyrender followed. Regal and Valyrian wheeled behind. For dragons cut across the sky, their shadows crossing storm and sea alike. In the frozen wastes beyond the wall, blue eyes lifted toward those distant shapes. Old cold anger stirred. Fire had met fire. Soon, fire would meet ice.